Spring football or no football? Yeah, life is not perfect. If you didn't get that after the college football playoff game last year, Ohio State fans, yes, life is not necessarily fair, and we will try to make it through a 2020 or 2021 college football season. And we talk Ohio State football here each and every week. We've got Tony Gerdeman on the line from Buckeyes Scoop there on the top corner. And also, of course, Mr. Steve Hillwagon, senior Big Ten writer at 247 Sports. Bucknuts. Guys, considering the circumstances, how are we doing today?
Feels like
all right.
Feels like an old friend has passed away. Is what it feels like here. I mean, I had to get out my media guide from back when they used to publish them. I mean, they're all online now, obviously, but I have one from 2003 after they won the national championship the year before, and I just popped it out and I looked at the years, and they've played football every year since 1890, and in 2020 they are not going to play football, which is just unbelievable to me. And I took to Twitter and was very outspoken. Tony posted some stuff today from the Iowa parents who have been very upset and irate about the situation. I don't get all the hatred for Nebraska. To me, Nebraska's in the right. And I don't know. A lot of questions and no answers is kind of where I'm left here sitting here today.
And this is why I have the two of you here to give the Ohio State perspective in particular, and certainly touch on some points and I'm sure some angles that I have failed to do so. But believe me, for the last 4 or 5 days, I've been sitting here for hours. So people have certainly heard my stance. We'll get to that maybe at some point, but it's much more important to hear from you two. So Steve, we'll continue with you in regards to why do you think the determination was made? Of course, health and safety is the reason given publicly, but why was the decision made by the Big Ten? And what is your stance on the decision?
Well, they put out a schedule last Wednesday, and then by Sunday afternoon, word had come out there'd been a vote 12-2 or whatever it was. I guess that came out Monday morning on the Dean Patrick show. That it was 12-2 and that Nebraska and Iowa were the only dissenters. And we don't know if that's true or not true, because the Big Ten commissioner, Kevin Warren, other than doing 20-minute segment on Big Ten Network with Dave Rebson, who I wonder is going to still be employed at Big Ten Network after the way he kind of grilled the commissioner. And then a puff piece with very sympathetic Pete DeMel of Yahoo Sports after that. He's done no interviews with anybody. And, we're left wondering what really happened here, because they put a schedule out almost and pulled the plug almost in the same motion. And it was just, I can't even, there's a lot of things I want to say. I have to be careful with what I do say, but part of me wonders if this is tied back to the athletes' unity, if they did want to go down that road and have to address that at this time. They came up with this heart situation, myocarditis, that they said in some athletes has created some long-term health issues for those athletes, maybe driven some people out of athletics altogether, as in their athletic careers are over because they contracted that. And the risk of that, that just seemed like it came out of nowhere. And Ohio State was so bothered by it that a day after the cancellation, they were still out there hustling, trying to figure out a way to play football. So the heart thing was not even a consideration for Ohio State or Nebraska. Not even a thought. Not even a passing thought. Not a threat. Meant nothing to them. They were still out there trying. That'll tell you how they viewed that it was not that big of a risk. I did a radio show in Arkansas, and the host asked me, Steve, if they test these athletes and you have two teams that are clean, have been clean, test clean on Friday, play on Saturday, what is the risk? And I had no answer for the guy. I had no answer other than the team traveling to the game. Somebody could contract it, although they're going to be on a charter, which would be sanitized in a hotel that's probably set up by the home team and completely sanitized through a protocol. I don't see that there's any risk at all. I mean, if there is, it's infinitesimal. So I honestly don't know. And then we're left in the aftermath, this obtuse way of thinking that the Big Ten is now standing in the way of its member schools who want to play. It is just beyond me. There's no harm done to the Big Ten by allowing 4 or 5 of these schools to go off on their own and play each other and find 4 or 5 other games to finish out a schedule. There's no harm in that. I don't even understand why that is a problem. If Nebraska, Ohio State, Iowa, Michigan, Penn State, those 5 in particular, want to go and play this season, I don't know why that's even an issue. I mean, they could have played a double round robin, and there's 8 games right there, fill in another couple somewhere else, and you got a season. And this is viewed as a bad thing. Maryland had 8 guys opt out. They were supposed to play 6 ranked teams in their 10-game schedule. Hell no, they don't want to play. Rutgers, I mean, it's a hot spot. Heavens no, they don't want to play. So they don't have to play. But let the ones who do want to play. And there's been no explanation from the Big Ten why they can't. Gene Smith was left to say, well, we were told we're not allowed. By who? By whose authority? And where's it written that you can't play? I know that they have a conference agreement and they've granted their television rights to the Big Ten. I get all that. But there should have been some way to accommodate the schools that wanted to play. And I haven't found a good reason why they're not playing, or haven't found a good reason why they can't accommodate the schools that want to play. So that's, Tony, I'll let you go for the next 5 minutes. But that's a lot of what I'm thinking right there. I don't know.
Well, when Nebraska wants to go and play and Kevin Warren is like, well, you can, but not as a member of the Big Ten. If Ohio State wants to go play, is Kevin Warren, is the Big Ten going to kick Ohio State out of the Big Ten? Are they going to be like, now since you went and you played whomever, now you can't be in the Big Ten any longer? I don't know. That's not going to happen. What do you just slap their wrist, hold some money from them? Fine, whatever. But to throw these threats around, it's just more people are not happy with Kevin Warren right now, and to have the Big Ten threatening people or putting their foot down when, and I think I tweeted this after the decision. It's like what we're supposed to assume from these doctors is when one player without COVID-19 tackles another player without COVID-19, boom, they now have COVID-19. That's what we're supposed to assume. When, if like as Steve said, if everybody's clean, how do you get it? And when it comes down to several of the Big Ten programs saying, we feel good about what we are doing. We feel good about what we are doing to keep players safe. And in a practice, we believe we can tackle, we can practice. Because again, tackling does not create COVID-19. I think we need to clarify that. You don't get COVID-19 from contacting somebody without COVID-19. I don't know if the Big Ten knows that. They've got a lot of doctors, but they might be missing that one part. So you get these teams that want to play. Now, Ryan Day and Justin Fields and other people at Ohio State have said, yeah, we want to play, but we are concerned what other teams are doing, what other programs are doing. And when you look at the crazy stuff that's going on in the ACC, I understand why Ryan Day and Justin Fields aren't so sure that everybody else is doing what they're doing. So there is some concern there. And this is where I'm going to say it. The Big Ten needs to step in and actually do something and lead. And in my own podcast, I equated it to when the UN goes into Iran to look at the nuclear facilities to make sure they're creating fuel and not weapons. The Big Ten needs to go to each campus and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing to protect their players. And you know what they did? They sat in Chicago and were like, the lawyers get involved, and it's like, well, then it just becomes complete liability. There's no point in going and visiting the campuses because they never had any intention of playing. They had to throw a schedule out there because that's part of the process. I think Kevin Warren even said that when Dave Revson, bless his soul, was trying to get answers out of Kevin Warren and even had to ask him twice on more than one occasion. Well, that's great, Kevin. But my question remains, what do you. And so I don't really, it doesn't feel like they had any intention of playing, and they were just assuming that the NCAA would step in and shut it all down so they didn't have to. And then it got to the point where now it looks like we're going to have to, but they didn't have to just yet. And that was Gene Smith's claim. That was what Ryan Day was saying. That's what Christina Johnson, Ohio State president, that's what they wanted. Like, why shut it down now when you've been waiting and doing nothing for so long? Now you want to get involved. Now you want to act. And Steve alluded to the letter from the Iowa parents, and they're not alone. Gosh, you remember like 10 days ago, I don't know, maybe it was 5 days ago, maybe it was a week ago, when Ohio State players came out and had a letter saying, we feel safe. And they were bashed and vilified for saying, hey, we feel pretty good about what Ohio State is doing. And now you have that seems so long ago, where you have players coming out and say, we feel safe, we think we can do this, and they were seen as the bad guys.
Yeah. Rever, as you say, God bless him. One of the questions was, how does your son play at Mississippi State? And the entire Big Ten can't play. And he said, well, we're just trying to do what's best for the Big Ten. That is a family issue. Mm-hmm. And he completely ducked the question. He had no answer to that question of the, I don't know if you call it hypocrisy. The hypocrisy, the despair. I don't know what, there's a word for this, disparity. It's completely incongruous. I mean, how his own son is allowed to play or able to play, and he pulls the plug on an entire league. I mean, I am just completely dumbfounded. That's one of the many things that I've left just scratching my head and wondering, how is this even possible in the year 2020? How is this even possible? But of course, this year has proven to show us that anything and everything can happen. So stuff that you just wouldn't believe in a million years have happened this year, and I presume going to continue to happen. And it's unfortunate. Ohio State had a national championship caliber team. They had a Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback, and Ohio State is at the all-time height of its football program right now. And you just wonder if, I read a tweet today, people are already contacting Ohio State recruits from schools at the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 and saying that, well, we care more about football than they do. And, they're right. They're right. I don't know what – and is it healthy? Is this obsession with football healthy? I don't know, but it's the industry that we're all in. I mean, I consider myself a small part of the industry. The coaches and players are the industry, the universities, but it's our way of life in the Midwest to have football on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays every weekend, and now we have a major void there.
When Kevin Warren says it'll be a family decision, it's nice that his family gets to make that decision. And it would have been nice if other families would have been able to make that same decision. And what other families do, just not in the Big Ten. And when we talked to Ryan Day a couple of days ago, I asked him, how do you reconcile that Kevin Warren's own son could be playing college football this year? And knowing that I wasn't going to get an answer, but shooting my shot to get one, Ryan Day said, well, I don't know about that, and we're just focused on ourselves. So, and then you feel bad for the kid, to where now it's almost like, is there going to be an outcry for him not to play just so his dad doesn't look like a hypocrite, and to just take a little bit of stress off of him? And I still think there's a long way to go before there's an actual game played. So, but we could talk about it now because it's happening now. But I'm not going to be shocked or surprised when everybody shuts it down.
And his son can opt out with absolutely no penalty. Retain the scholarship, retain the eligibility, come back next season.
Yep.
So to extend
nice.
on your point, Steve, in regards to the safety and guidelines that were approved by Ohio State players and families, and I've heard the same feedback from other groups of players on other teams in regards to evaluating how their particular school and program is handling the situation in a positive vein. I don't care where we go in college football. We can go to Los Angeles, a major market, or we can go to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or Manhattan, Kansas. Once those players are in those facilities, it's the same environment. As long as the safety and health guidelines are consistent and they're thorough and executed, you can keep players on the practice field outside, inside, in a weight room, in a study hall, online classes, in game rooms, bowling, playing ping pong, playing video games, and in their living quarters. And that's pretty much where they're going to be, in the cafeteria, eating together and with, again, personnel that has been tested and approved and passed. I just don't see where they're not safer playing football within that environment than they are just as students.
On campus, with an open campus with other students, and there's no liability there apparently. And
yep,
that was what Gene Smith said. There's this football has contact, and you know what? So does regular college. Regular college also has plenty of contact. So I don't see the big difference there. And again, players are being tested way more than the biology class, or way more than a local bar is being tested. So it's, the original talk was, how can you have football when you don't have students on campus? And now it's turned to, how can you have no football and yet you can have students on campus? Those two things that doesn't make any sense either. I think that makes much less sense than having football with no students on campus, because that makes football safer. To have all of these students on campus and you just, you know what, it's safe, but then to consider football not safe when there is so much more testing, but it's okay for the players to then go to classes, and classes are safe. Football isn't. Football gets tested. Classes don't. Whatever. I don't know.
The other 2 points I keep running into, guys, is one being that, okay, there are possible, maybe probable long-term impact to contracting the virus. Playing spring football, how much more are we going to know about the long-term impacts of this virus playing spring football? What difference is that going to make? Seemed to me none.
Yeah, you've hit a perfect hit the nail right on the head. I don't know that, in the column that I wrote, so is it going to be safe in the winter and spring of 2021 or the fall of 2021, or do we wait until 2025? Do we have to have a vaccine for the coronavirus? Do the numbers just need to go down a little bit? And, there could be a spike in the next several months to take it even beyond where it's at right now, and they wouldn't play then, I wouldn't think. So, I get Ryan Day came out and was really gung-ho about the idea of playing football in February and March, I guess, was maybe his idea, was practice in January and then maybe play an 8-game season in February or March. I think that has some drawback to it. Anything we come up with is going to have drawback to it at this point. What are you really playing for? Are those exhibition games, or are they, for a quote Big Ten championship of some sort? Does the winner go play the Pac-12 spring champion in a May 15 Rose Bowl or something? I know we're in the infancy stages of having to address this, but one, we don't know that it's going to be any different or better in the span of 4 months to where you can start practice. And two, why would you have a new quarterback, either Stroud or Miller, presumably, Although McCord, the other guy, the 2021 guy, would probably enroll as well and go through the January practice as well. Maybe he steals it. I don't know. Why would you select a quarterback and then put them in harm's way in March and risk them breaking their leg and not being able to play in the real games in September, October, November, December, and January, when you may have a chance? This is they're going to be like a lot of teams. We're focused on Ohio State and everything that's going to be swept aside, like Justin Fields, Sean Wade, and maybe Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis, and the juniors that are going to the pros, and certainly the seniors. I mean, maybe some of them would come back. I don't know if Tuck Borland would come back for a 6th year. Would Justin Hilliard come back for a 7th year? I don't know. Hard to say. I guess Borland would only be 5th year. I guess maybe he's a 4-year senior. I don't know. But at any rate, a lot of schools are going to be in the same boat where they're going to have 40 new freshmen, basically 2 classes of freshmen that have never played, and a complete vacuum of upperclassmen who have played, who are gone. You may only have 5 starters back from your 2019 team to play in 2021. So if that's what it is, that's what it is. But I think it's going to be that way for everybody. But I don't know. I don't know what's gained by playing in February and March other than getting some seasoning for those young guys who've never played. Ryan Day was gung-ho to get established that that's what we're going to do, because he wants to be able to go out and tell Jack Sawyer and these other 2021 guys, hey, you get graduated in December, we'll have you on the field playing in live games in February and March. That type thing. The prospect is there for you to play in February and March. And so that's kind of a carrot that he can resurrect his recruiting around if they allow that. But again, I think experience depth. I don't know. It's going to be a weird year.
One quick point, Tony, and then we'll cut you loose. This is what's not gained by a spring season with just the Big Ten and the Pac-12 as the major 5 conferences playing. This is what's not gained. Let's be real about it. I'm the aberration of a college football fan. I think Kansas State's relevant. I think everybody's relevant because I just love watching college football, and the 8-4 season's relevant to me, going to the Red Box Bowl. But I'm on the periphery. Out of the Big Ten and the Pac-12, who matters to the nation? One school, one team, Ohio State. Penn State to some, but they have yet to prove it. Ohio State, they're the only one that matters. So this SEC, ACC, Big 12, if they follow through and play the conclusion of a season, is going to be legitimized by many. Maybe not everyone, but in College Football Nation, they're going to say, well, the SEC wins almost every year anyway, so it's legitimate. Clemson wins all the time. So between Alabama, LSU, Clemson, and some of the other ones, Georgia, Florida, this is legit. Versus Ohio State running the table and then clobbering some Pac-12 team in the Rose Bowl for a let's claim a national championship. That's not going to move the needle in the eyes of most.
No, and you're absolutely right. That with those other schools, and I tweeted this out the other day, where once the Pac-12 and Pac-12 and Big Ten were out, that only dropped the national championship contenders down 1. It only removed 1, but the number went from 3 to 2. It's like now it's just Alabama or Clemson, and you could say Georgia, you could say Florida, you could say Oklahoma. Maybe this is their best opportunity now, and I don't think it's about a national title or anything in the winter. I think for Ryan Day and the players, it's just playing. It wouldn't be, obviously it's not going to be the same team. This team, I think, was headed for a national title because they had the right mentality. They were focused and they're pretty talented. And then to now have a very different team in the winter, as Steve said, you're going to be starting a true freshman quarterback one way or another, because Ohio State will have about, 55 freshman eligible players on their next team. And, who knows how many scholarships they'll actually have. And I mentioned this a few weeks ago at the end of one of these shows, where some teams are going to have more scholarship players than others because Wisconsin can't afford to bring back as many players as Ohio State. And then you're going to have some disparities, and you're going to have some awful, awful conversations between coaches and seniors who want to come back. And the coach is saying, no, we can't bring you back. We could, but we'd have to cut a freshman, or we'd have to, we can't bring you back. We can't afford it. And so then that's another conversation to come. But yeah, a national title without the Big Ten or Pac-12 would be completely legitimized, Steve, by ESPN most of all.
Mark's people. Yeah, I hope that they allow schools to have an allowance for every senior who wants to come back, and this is what your number would be without them, and then this is what your number is. Like, those people are treated as a separate subset of scholarships, so maybe another 7 or 8 beyond the 85. I would hope that they're able to do that, because that only makes sense. I mean, if we froze the roster as of today and said, this is what you figured to have been able to sign, all things being equal, of course, to put that past the NCAA is probably giving them too much credit. But I don't know. That just seems to make sense to me that in an extraordinary situation, having an extra 6 guys who are going to play just one last year is not a major breaking point or something that's going to tip the scales of competitive balance or whatever for one season. I think in this case, you err to the side of the student athlete and give them that opportunity to finish out their eligibility the way that they would have hoped to finish it out. And, we think about, okay, if there is a spring season and you got a guy like Jonathan Cooper, who in my mind, I don't know what he's ranked on draft boards. I would put him probably 5th, 6th, 7th round, something like that, or even an undrafted free agent. Like, if you look at his body of work at Ohio State, he's a defensive end. And let me see here.
I think he has like 6.5 career sacks, 5.5,
yeah,
6.5.
Just looking it up, that number sounds right. I got it right here. Cooper, in his career, has 6.5 career sacks. You were dead on that. I'm not sure. Maybe he plays outside linebacker in the NFL. I don't know. But again, I'm out of my depth talking about, how he would fit into an NFL team. But I don't think he's done enough yet to be a top 4 round draft pick yet. And so maybe he's a guy who would benefit from playing in February and March, showing the NFL, hey, I am a great competitor. I'm a great leader. I'm an impact player. You need to draft me in the 2nd or 3rd round. He's got a ceiling, in my opinion. I don't think he's much higher than a 3rd round draft pick at this point. I wouldn't think. So he's an example of a guy who probably would benefit from it. Justin Fields obviously is the number 2 overall pick behind Sunshine. I don't know what he would gain by even stepping onto a practice field other than staying sharp. And if I'm one of those guys who's going in the 2021 draft, I'm availing myself of all the free training Mick and the guys want to give me between now and January the 1st. And, then I'll pay my trainer to take over after January the 1st and kind of keep that door open that I could still play at Ohio State. Let them see if they can formulate a plan. But it's all pie in the sky to me. We talk about player safety in one breath, and then we're going to put them out there for 22 games in a calendar year in the other breath. And that just doesn't reconcile for me. So, someone needs to explain to me, one possible idea is to maybe put a limit on the number of quarters that a player could play in the spring season, kind of like JV football. Those guys are limited to 5 quarters in a weekend. They can play on special teams in a varsity game or whatever, but couldn't play in a offense-defense situation more than 5 quarters in a given weekend or whatever the number is. And that's how they're able to keep a kid who plays, a full-time varsity player can't go down and play a full-time JV schedule. So maybe they come up with some kind of a restriction that you can only play in 70% of the quarters in the spring or something like that, or I don't know, something to kind of keep the tread off of these guys, because it just seems like an awful lot. If, wear and tear injuries, you're going to have stress fractures, you're going to have different things that are going to pop up because of this. Probably in the fall season, just because of the wear and tear. It wouldn't be necessarily a blown knee. Well, I mean, it could be a blown knee, but, just too much wear and tear on the body, things break down.
One of the aspects that we're going to end up seeing as well, having a full season canceled, is Ohio State next year will have like 7 true freshman wide receivers, like, 7, 8, 9 true freshman offensive linemen, who then will end up, if they all leave at the same time, it's just this up and down nature of how do you rebuild the roster so that you don't lose so many guys each year. The other aspect would be that this year's true freshmen would be able to leave after 2 years of playing. They would be able to leave as sophomores because they would be 3 years removed from high school. So that would be one way of, like the guys who were supposed to enroll for 2020, they would be able to leave in this year's their freshman season. Next year's also their true freshman season. Then after their true sophomore season, which would be 3 years removed, they would be able to leave for the NFL. And that would be able to separate them a little bit from their classmates that will be entering the same time in 2021. But you're not going to have a lot of guys leaving early on the offensive line. So you could be in a situation where, like I said, you've got 8 or 9 true freshman offensive linemen who, if you lose 6 in a year, 4 or 5 years from now, like that's a lot to replace, and it's a lot of it's displaced weight in terms of your roster, and it's like being in a boat. If the weight shifts wrong or you've got too much weight in one area, you're going to tip, and so there's going to be some roster management that a lot of these programs are going to have to do, because things are just going to be too crowded in one area, not crowded in enough. And when that big crowd leaves, now you have to replace it. And you can't replace it with equal talent, because you can't bring in 7, 8 guys that were as good as those guys who left, because you can't get all of those guys in one class, because you're fighting with 100 other programs, or, 12 or 15 if you're in like the elite program. So there's just stuff like that is going to be an issue for years down the road. And I don't buy that the Big Ten is going to be set back for decades or years, but rosters are going to be affected for a while.
Yeah, I look at the guys who just came in, the 2020 guys, Fleming and Smith and Najigba, and some of these guys. Theoretically, they're going to play they're not getting to play in 20. They're going to get to play in 2021. They're going to get to play in 2022. Then they're eligible for the draft. So you're only going to get 2 seasons out of some of these guys, 2 fall seasons out of the guys who just arrived, who are NFL players, which I'm not saying any of them are a lock to leave and go get drafted, but if they play well in their 2 seasons, they'll be gone. So that's a byproduct of this as well, that the guys who are freshmen in 2020 may actually only have 2 fall seasons, and they'll be off to the NFL. You make a good point, as you say, if I don't have the exact number here, but between redshirt freshmen this year, the true freshmen this year, and the guys coming in 2021, that's probably about 50 guys who would be freshman eligibility in 2021. So yeah, it is. Then they're gonna fan out from there. Some of those guys will be redshirted in 2021. Not play enough to I would presume some of the 2021 signees will be redshirted in 2021. It's just 5, 6, 7 of them typically get redshirted, so they'll fan out a little bit. But yeah, in the next, they could have a year where they lose 30 some guys down the line, and that would be tough to overcome. But that's why Ryan Day gets paid the big bucks, roster management.
I'd like to honor the question from Roger Smith. Maybe you guys will have more success interpreting this. If not, we'll move on. What would cause decisions to be made like canceling college football? There are movers and shakers beyond a small college football. This is big movers and shakers are worldwide. Are we making anything out of that?
Well, I think what he's just saying is that this is something that should have gone beyond just and I use the term a local commissioner like the Big Ten. This in some regards we think college football is a national institution, but it in this sense it wasn't. It was just something controlled by this small cabal of schools that decided not to play this year. And there is no commissioner for college football. The NCAA is hands off. They've had their hands slapped and their power basically muted by the Power 5 conferences, who now drive every decision that's made nationally is kind of their benefit and to the detriment of everybody else, it seems now. I mean, they have done some things to stewardship the game. I mean, they at least allow a group of 5 team to play in one of the New Year's Six bowls, which it could be a closed shop. That's their one bone they throw them. They still have an NCAA basketball tournament with each passing year. You see leagues get outside the Power 5 get fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer berths. And, when was the last time the MAC had 2 teams in the tournament? Probably 20-some years or more. And there have been years where they've deserved to have, 2 teams in and they don't get it. But it truly is haves and have-nots. And the Power 5 commissioners are running college sports right now. And there was some type of conference call, I think, with the 5 of them on Sunday or Monday. And I just wonder if Warren got on that call and was like, guys, we're out. And we know the Pac-12 is going to be out. You guys might consider getting out as well and doing it all as a group. And he got laughed at, I presume, by the other 3. He said, no, we're going to stay the course for now, which, we'll see if they end up playing or not. But Roger's question is kind of valid. You would think that this would go beyond, just one league and one commissioner making a decision that shapes the sport. But that's kind of the way things have broken down in college sports now, is that the Power 5 conferences dominate everything and they rule the world. And certainly the Big Ten commissioner in this instance has cracked the whip, and he's got all of his soldiers in line right behind him, it sounds like right now. So it's sad, really.
Tony, I can't believe that it's taken us 40 minutes of discussion and actually days and days and days, and I'm sure you guys have not hit on this jewel of a point during your many conversations and podcasts and your articles, that what really is happening here is that the Big Ten is protecting Ohio State from another embarrassment to Clemson. And all the medical testing and everything is just a smoke and mirrors.
You know how, like, when you're at a bar or whatever and the scrawny guy starts to get into it with somebody who's going to beat the crap out of him, the scrawny guy's like, hold me back, and his friends hold him back because they don't want him to die. Yeah, that's what the Big Ten is doing here. Ohio State, they're complaining, saying, you let me go, I want to fight. And the Big Ten's like, oh, no, we'll hold you back. So, yes, this is the Big Ten protecting Ohio State from Clemson, because Ohio State obviously doesn't want any part of Clemson, and they know they will lose, and so it's just best for they're just putting up a brave face, knowing that the Big Ten will be there to protect them. And really, in all of this, maybe it's just Ohio State wants Clemson so bad that to not be able to get them this year, I think that's one of those things that, when you look at all of the, like, what pains you the most for all of these players, not playing Michigan, sure, not being with my brothers, as they would say, and just not playing at all, but not getting an opportunity to get revenge on Clemson, knowing that it's pretty likely you're going to see them in the playoffs. I think that I'm not talking about any revenge tour. Michigan has the rights to the revenge tours, and we know how those work. But Ohio State definitely wanted Clemson again, and eventually, law of averages says Ohio State eventually has to beat Clemson at some point, right?
Yeah, that was going to be my point following up what you're saying is all good things must come to an end. I mean, USC had a great run in whatever decade that was, the 2000s, and Pete Carroll left and it fell apart. And Ohio State's dominated Michigan for 8 years, but what's to say that, that's not going to change sometime in the near future? Alabama's dominance of the SEC has been, they've ruled it with an iron fist, but LSU snuck through there last year and won the whole national championship as a result. Auburn's dinged them a couple times as well. So Clemson finally had their breakthrough and won the national championship after several attempts, a couple years ago. So at some point, if they were going to play Ohio State against Clemson, let's just say in the playoff every other year for the next, 10 years, meet 4 or 5 times, Ohio State was going to break through and win one of those. I don't know if it was going to be this year or not. I think Ohio State, if we go back over that game and we can point to the officiating and whatever, I thought Ohio State dominated the game and just had every conceivable break that could go against them win against them. Clemson got stops in the red zone that kept Ohio State out of the end zone 3 times in the first half. They had to settle for field goals, but they're in the red zone 3 times. In fact, they're inside the 10-yard line twice and had to settle for field goals. So give Clemson, I guess, that credit, but I thought otherwise Ohio State was able to move the ball effectively. And really for 2.5 quarters, Clemson did nothing offensively. So I don't know. I know the final score turned out the way it was, and that's what as Luke Fickell and Urban Meyer like to say, it is a evaluation friendly sport. You can look on the scoreboard and get the evaluation that counts. So yeah, get bullied to Clemson. They're great. They're on top of the sport right now, and everyone else is trying to knock them off that pedestal.
Tony, you alluded to this just a second ago, and obviously take off on anything you want to, but I want to draw back to something that you started on, is the best possible outcome for the Big Ten in terms of maintaining competitive balance with the other conferences would be that their season caves in as well this fall, and then they all have to play in the spring or not until 2021's fall season. But if that doesn't happen and there is a successful college football season played by the other 3, you're not predicting any kind of huge decline or drawback for the conference or for Ohio State.
No, I think this is an opportunity for the ACC and the Big 12 to make a move to the number 2 conference. Definitely. Not having Ohio State out there this year would be devastating. Ryan Day said it would be devastating to not play and have everybody else play. And this was a gamble by the Big Ten. Sure, they absolutely think everybody else is going to cancel, or else why do it this early? Ohio State is a giant monster that can it take a year off and pick right back up? The roster probably is not going to be there to do that, because you're going to be starting a true freshman quarterback. You're going to have, like I said, it's going to be a freshman heavy team. So it might be a while might be a couple of years before they're back in the playoff hunt. Although if you're just going through the Big Ten, if you're able to beat the Big Ten, then you're still in the playoff hunt. So that's also why I don't know how much they will be negatively impacted. They will, yes, there's going to be negative impact. Does it drop them down to the level of a Florida State or something like that? I don't think so, because they're still competing against the conference, the Big Ten, and everybody's going to be in that same boat. And Ohio State has more talent than anybody else in the conference. So that will allow them to stay at a certain level. Now, are they playing in the top 4? It just depends on what the voters think. And then they put them in once and they get killed, then they're probably not going to get in the next time for a couple of years. So we'll see. I don't know that it's going to be this thing that sets Ohio State back 5 or 6 years. I remember after the debacle in Glendale, a debacle in the desert against Urban Meyer's Gators, thinking this is going to set Ohio State back 5 years. They were in the game. They were in the championship game the next year. So, we've seen doom and gloom before. Never like this. to not play an entire season is we don't even know what the impact will be because it's just we've never seen it before. So any speculation is going to be just guessing at this point. Ohio State is SMU? Like, no, I don't think so, unless everybody leaves. I don't think they're going to leave.
At the time of the Penn State scandal with Sandusky's crime, I thought that was going to set them back considerably because I was just thinking, okay, they're not an elite program now. They're a top 20 or 25 program. They recruit Pennsylvania, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. Okay. What four-star is going to want to go? Because I think we kind of forget, or at least I do, the stigma that was on that school just 7 or 8 years ago. So I thought, what big-time player that's also being recruited by Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan State at the time is going to go to Penn State? Why would you go to Penn State and put up with that? You can't go to postseason play, can't win a Big Ten championship, and you're automatically stigmatized. But the NCAA lifted some penalties, some scholarships came back, some postseason play came back, and boom, they're going 7-5, 8-4 like that, and they're back in it.
Why do players go to Miami? Like it still means something to some people. So Ohio State would still mean something to plenty of people, and they would still continue to go there, I think.
Steve, everybody brings up money, and rightfully so, that while this has been speculated about ever since mid-March when it all broke loose and they started taking teams off the court during the basketball season, that the money's going to rule out. There's too much money at stake. They're going to play. And I understand that argument. Well, the MAC decided not to play, and I can understand it. The testing is super expensive, and they're missing all their big-time opponents. For example, Kent State was playing Alabama, Kentucky, and Penn State. It's like $5.5 million that was going to come their way to play those 3 games, plus whatever they draw from concessions and ticket sales, which isn't much. It's mostly TV and those payoffs against the big boys, and then they don't have to deal with all the testing in season. So it makes sense for the MAC to cancel, but for the Big Ten to cancel when the reports are from the latest football season that, and I'm guessing 90% of College Football Nation would miss this, thinking the SEC brought in the most revenue. No, the Big Ten brought in the most revenue in the most recent football season per team at over $55 million. That you would think if they were siding with money, they'd play.
Yeah, that does just another head scratcher here as to what the thought process was. Just a little bit of insight about the Mid-American. I used to do segments quite a bit with the Spectrum sports outlet here in Ohio. It's now Spectrum News. They kind of gone away from sports, so we don't do the hour-long and half-hour-long shows that we used to do about college football there. And they had a package. They had a game of the week on Spectrum Live television for the MAC, and it got taken away from them. They have a contract. I think they do some stuff with CBS Sports Network, and ESPN has some of their games as well. But ESPN came in and gave them some kind of a good deal, I guess, to pull them off of Spectrum and do all the games that aren't on live television are at least webcast on ESPN Plus, probably part of their subscriber system. So I guess I would just say the TV deal that they have is better than the TV deal they had with Spectrum. You could say that. I don't know. Is it $10,000 or is that $200,000? I don't know, but they do have something that they're leaving on the table, whatever it might be. In this case, for the Big Ten, it's just so complicated. I just don't even know what to say. That if 5 of these teams played football, would ESPN and Fox only give them that percentage of the money? I don't, just because the inventory of games would be so much fewer. I mean, they've devalued the Big Ten network by doing this. And that's something that all the schools have a stake in, is the value of that network They own 49% of it, and I think it brings in a ton of money. Obviously, from its fledgling beginning in 2007, it's grown into something wonderful that enriches all these schools very well. And the money is crazy because Ohio State's athletic budget is roughly $200 million a year. And I think they have over 300 employees, something like that. They have 1,200 student athletes, and they have pledged that they're going to continue all of their scholarship obligations through all of this. So that expenditure right there is heavy, certainly in the many millions. I would put that probably at, now all 1,200 of those students are not on full scholarship, but there is a good number of them that are on full scholarship. If I worked in the Ohio State athletic department and I was not hands-on with an athlete, as in doing off-season training or maybe even nutrition, a football assistant coach, the football head coach, the head coach of all the other sports, beyond those people I just listed, they have no need for you right now for the next year. They could furlough you. 200 people could be out of work as a result of this. The only way I think that this works, Ohio State has an endowment, I looked it up on Wikipedia recently, of about $4 billion, give or take, maybe more, I don't know. Some schools have them for many billions of dollars, like Harvard or wherever, but I think it's in the $4 billion range. And again, I'm sure somebody working over there will have a solution to this, but Gene Smith, we've never interviewed him yet to ask him this question, the $200 million question. To me, my solution would be to borrow money from that endowment to underwrite sports for 1 year, $200 million, or $150 million if they do some cutbacks or whatever. And then over a period of 10 to 20 years, you just pay that back to the endowment and, $10 million a year, whatever, till you pay it off is what would make sense to me. I don't know how they're going to solve it. I don't know who's going to get the furlough, who's going to be just out of a job. I mean, I don't have a program from 1980 here right in front of me where I could hold it up and show you. But if you went to a game in 1980 and got a football program, you would turn to a page that had the athletic department staff. And you had everybody who worked in the athletic department on one page, all their headshots. You had a ticket director, maybe a ticket assistant. You had business manager. You had a controller. You had, a couple assistant athletic directors, the athletic director himself, a physician, and that was about it. You didn't have, if you tried to do it now, it'd take up the entire program. You'd have page after page after page after page of headshots. People who work at the arena that has no events. People who work at the stadium that has no events. That's an unintended consequence of this. Some of these people are going to have their salaries cut, put on a furlough. You hope they don't lose their health insurance, their benefits, and everything else. But, there's nothing for a lot of these people to do for the next 8-10 months because there's nothing happening in their realm right now. So that is an unintended consequence of this. I tweeted out and put it in my column. If I was the lacrosse coach at Nebraska or the assistant lacrosse coach at Nebraska, if I was the golf course superintendent at Nebraska, if I was anybody who is not directly hands-on with an athlete and manager of the arena at Nebraska, and I'm out of a job, I'd probably sue the Big Ten because they arbitrarily, in the view of many people, made this decision, and then they wouldn't let Nebraska go play to try and recoup some of that revenue. They would not let Nebraska go play. Think about that. They would not let Nebraska go play to recoup the revenue to pay my salary. Do you think I'd be upset about that? I think that's restraint of trade, in honesty. I mean, in some regard, I'm not a labor lawyer and I'm not a high finance lawyer or whatever, but I think I think they have opened themselves up to a potential by standing in the way of allowing Nebraska to cover its athletic expenses in this time of need. Because I can't imagine Fox and ESPN are paying them the money for no games this year. I can't. Again, I'm not Darren Ravel. I don't, I'm not Rudy Martzke, from USA Today. I love that column in USA Today every Monday after the NFL games. You got to see who flubbed what, all the broadcasts and whatever, the funny comments or whatever. But I can't. Maybe they're paying a holder fee, a 10 million, a tide over fee or something, but they're not paying the full freight. There's no way.
Well, and it's not just the campuses. I'm thinking like across the street from Ohio State's campus. I read an article or saw a tweet. I don't read articles, obviously. I read tweets. But the Varsity Club, Ohio State bar across the street from Ohio State's campus makes enough money on a football Saturday to pay their costs for a year.
Yeah.
Which is insane to me. And, props to the amount of drinking that goes on there. But
Tony,
stuff like that is gone too.
Yeah, I'll just throw in. I had a friend who worked, he was a student, and then his last year or two, and even a year or two after he was out of college, he was a bar back or a bartender there in the basement was his area. And, it's wall-to-wall people, upstairs, downstairs, out on the patio. He came out of there one Saturday night, I want to say, with between $1,000 and $1,500 in tips, because the people start drinking at 7 a.m. and they don't stop until midnight. I mean, it is a full day, around the game, whenever it would be. So we have one friend, Tony White, who used to play basketball at Ohio State back in the 80s. He's a successful attorney, and I'm not outing him here on the show, but that is his game day location, is the Varsity Club. And we always had a joke that on one of his key rings, he's got a key where he can open the door and get in there and start making his Jim Beam and Diet Cokes at 6:30 in the morning. So you're right. I mean, if one kid can walk out of there with over $1,000 in tips, think what the owners are making off the sale of all the alcohol.
It's insane because it is wall-to-wall people, and I don't know how you exist there. I couldn't do it. Mark, my last thought before we go is Ohio State got 1 year out of Justin Fields, 1 year out of Dwayne Haskins, no years out of Joe Burrow, 4 years out of JT Barrett. Good night.
That is dropping.
I'm not going to consider that JT
gavel right there.
No, it's not. It's just
that puts it in perspective right there in regards to looking at, and that is no slight on JT Barrett, very good college quarterback, but there is an obvious talent and ceiling difference between those three players and JT Barrett. Absolutely. Before that, Tony, I was going to cite, hey, the stat of the day was teed up by Steve and delivered by you, Jonathan Cooper, with 6.5 career sacks. I think you may need to look into doing this for a living.
Well, I do like to look up players who have been underachieved in their time and have only been asked about how much they've underachieved, like poor Jonathan Cooper has done. So some of those numbers stick in my mind when he has to be asked about it all the time. And he came back to show everybody what he could do, and then he didn't get a chance to do it. So that's another sad story about all of this.
And I'm not downgrading him as a player at all. I think he plays his role very well, and he's a platoon player. Yeah, he'd be a starter if he's healthy. And when he did play against Michigan, he had a sack and helped them win that game. So, it was all proven on that one day that he is a legitimate player, no doubt about it. I just think that he still has some things he needs to show the NFL to become, is he going to make a 52-man roster? That's a tough question for me right now. I don't know. I mean, when you see the guys who we know as great college players who struggle to make a mark in the NFL, it's not a surprise how difficult it is. Obviously, they're the best of the best, but it's interesting, no doubt.
And when people do cite Jonathan Cooper's stats like I do, and like we have, I like to remind people he was starting in 2018 ahead of Chase Young. It was Nick Bosa and it was Jonathan Cooper. Chase Young rotated in with those guys.
Yeah, Chase Young, he took off once Bosa got injured, and that's when he got his opportunity to play heavy reps after Bosa was injured.
2 quick points out of me, and then we're done. If we play a spring season and the first game is the first week of February, I'm just throwing out a time. I'm now hearing that would be backed up possibly to January. Spring football in Madison, Wisconsin, Minneapolis, Minnesota, anywhere in the Big Ten, but certainly those 2 spots, first and foremost. My goodness.
No, I think you got to put them in domes. You go around the footprint. There's St. Louis, there's Minneapolis, there's Detroit, there's Indianapolis. You have pods. You play a game at noon, you play a game at 7:30, something like that. You've got 4 teams at each site. Do it however you want. You start, and Albert Breer of the of Sports Illustrated, I think, is using Ryan Day's plan. First game is January 1st, the first week of January. Last regular season game is the last week of February. And your postseason is the first week or 2 of March. And then you've got 4.5 months before they go back to camp. And is that enough time to allow them to rest and then play a full fall season? That's up to the strength coaches. You know, I would love to hear Mickey Marotti's thoughts on that, Ohio State strength coach. Would he toe the line of, yes, we can do it? I think those are the questions that have to be answered. I like the sooner you play, the better chance you have of not interfering with the real season. Although if everybody else gets canceled, I think the winter season is going to be a real season because everybody's going to be playing it and everybody's going to want some sort of a national title. You start it sooner, you end it sooner, and then you get refocused on the fall season. But before any of that happens, the lawyers have to allow it.
Yeah. I just pulled this up here, the 2021 schedule for OSU. If we're inclined to look that far ahead, they're supposed to open on a Thursday night at Minnesota like they were supposed to open in the revised schedule at Illinois this year. September 2nd, I think, is at Minnesota. They're supposed to play Oregon, Tulsa, and Akron at home. I think the Oregon thing would go on. My way of thinking on how they make that right is to come back later in the decade in a year where they need a road non-conference game and just slip Oregon in there as the payback for that. But, you know, who knows? Maybe they play them in the spring at Oregon if that's possible. You know, I saw something where the UCLA coaches, that embattled Chip Kelly, is he the one there at UCLA? My Kellys are always tough for me to remember.
7-17.
Yeah, 7-17, lost to Cincinnati. Chip Kelly, he lost them twice. Yeah, home and away. Somebody said they were just now able to get into their offices or something because of COVID-19 restrictions or whatever. So while we think, okay, Ohio State has been working out for a couple months or whatever, it sounds to me like the Pac-12 is like light years behind even the Big Ten and where some of their programs could be. So because of the hot spots, you know, LA, et cetera, so on. But, you know, what a sad situation is all I can say. And I just wish we had more clarity from the Big Ten as to, you know, why. I mean, you're telling me if 5 of these schools agreed to play, that Fox and ESPN, you know, would I think they would have no problem honoring that percentage of their contract or their obligations. I mean, if you're giving them an inventory of games,
teams, yes,
yeah,
for those schools, the other sports that are happening right now with altered schedules and contracts.
Yeah.
Mark, my question for you: if there is no winter season, does Ohio State play at Michigan 2 years in a row, like last year and then this year? Do they, you know, does everything get pushed or rearranged to where this schedule now becomes next year's and then everything just gets pushed a year? Is it fair if Ohio State doesn't get a home game in between 2 road games to Michigan?
Not fair. I think they need to stay on schedule in regards to honoring the every other format. That's
for the division opponents. Yeah, I think that for the crossover games, I don't know. Well, that creates a ripple effect though, because you either play 5. So somebody may end up with 6 Big Ten home games if you didn't change the. I think you have to copy this year's schedule and paste it into next year.
Copy paste. Yes, easy enough.
Yeah.
Move it along. Just move it one year down the line.
Get the spreadsheet out and just create one row and just push everything down.
Now I'm down to 2 more points to throw at you guys for whatever response. If you've got 3 more minutes. We should not be feeling bad for Ryan Day. He's such a talented coach. He's always going to have a great job somewhere, whether it be in a 15-year stint at Ohio State or going to the NFL or whatever. What's that, Steve?
I'm getting ready to say because I have a feeling you want to ask us, does this lead him to...
No, I'm just going to make a statement.
Look at the Bengals job or the Browns job.
Or in line with what Tony was talking about, and this is a judgment call, but I agree with Tony that this is the best football team in the country. And, man, he just missed out on a playoff chance, and we could go on and debate the referees and all that business. But it was an extremely tight, close game, and even if all the officials made the right calls, it still came down to a miscommunication on a pass in the end zone at the end of the game. It's an excruciating loss. But he's a young coach. He's talented. He's got everything in front of him. But if this would turn out to be the worst possible scenario for the Big Ten and for Ohio State, and it's difficult for him to maintain what we just all kind of assume is elite status, but it can't be assumed. Maybe Ohio State is the Ohio State of the 80s suddenly, and this is a missed opportunity, and that catapults them into something different, catapults them into the current Wisconsin, Iowa level or something like that. I don't know, just a consideration. Our thoughts and feelings should go out more to the players that don't have an NFL future, that are deprived a senior season, certainly, but just from a historical standpoint of what could have been. And again, he's such a young guy with his future in front of him, I believe, that it should be not an issue, but it just crossed my mind.
I think they're in good hands with him because he is pretty grounded, and players and parents do really like him, and he comes across as genuine to all of them. So I think that will continue to play regardless down the road. And as long as he is at Ohio State, he will have something to sell. And he is just the way he comes across to the people that he is dealing with. He's a genuine guy. So you see a lot of players complaining about their coaches right now who they feel they're being lied to. And even Urban Meyer said, if players are coming out about your program, he said this like last week, that tells you that they don't trust the coaches. Like if they're going to the media about how they're being treated or what they're not being tested for, that they don't trust the coaches. All we have gotten from Ohio State's players and their parents is how much they trust these coaches. And that's not just because of a title on a door or a label or anything like that. That's because of the people. And Ryan Day will remain that person no matter how angry he gets at the Big Ten for throwing the best team in the nation under the bus. And, I'll just leave it at that.
Last point. 250 to 60 players get drafted in the NFL draft every year. There's legitimately 400 to 500 players that have legitimate hopes of being drafted. So we're talking about 400 to 500 players in that range or maybe more prepare for the NFL draft under normal circumstances. How do we play a college football season in which we squeeze this season in and then allow for those players to move on? And I'm not talking about the Justin Fields of the world that just say, I'm not playing, I'm preparing for the NFL draft, and I'm a top 5 selection. I'm talking about those guys that you mentioned, Jonathan Cooper. Do I need to put something else on tape? And if I do, does it become too late in the season that I play 5 games and then I say, see ya, I got to get ready for the combine? It could be a mess.
Yeah, it could get messy for sure. I think one of the benefits of a spring winter season is you get the freshmen in the depth, some seasoning, obviously, before the real bullets would fly in the fall, I guess. Ohio State's, I mentioned Cooper, but there's probably, a handful of guys. Thayer Munford, who was kind of banged up and played the last year or two, he maybe need to show some things at the tackle before he jumps off into the draft or whatever. So maybe he would play. I don't know. Ohio State has got young secondary that could use the seasoning, young wide receivers. So there are benefits to it, even if you're left with holes in your roster. The recruiting that they have done, they are deep at every position on the football field. Maybe the one area where they probably still need help is at linebacker, just because they have 7 or 8 scholarship linebackers who are juniors or seniors right now, and there'll be a tremendous vacuum in the next year or two at that position. But otherwise, they have the bodies across the board to withstand if the scenario you bring up, a player plays half of the winter season and says, okay, I got to go off and train now for the combine or whatever. Hey, it's a free country. It's a free world, I think viewership would be okay in the winter and spring. College basketball is just never, in at least the last 10 or 15 years, has kind of, if it's not the NCAA tournament, there just isn't a lot of interest in it. It seems like you would know better than I what the ratings are on ESPN, but it seems to me like a lot of those games get like a 1 rating on ESPN or something, which, you could put a fishing show on and it would do a 1 rating probably. So, the value of, unless it's a high-powered college basketball game, I just don't see that there's a lot of interest in college, as much interest as there should be perhaps in college basketball. So I don't think you're hurting college basketball to play college football too much in the winter and spring. It's just, who's going to take those games seriously? That's I don't know. We have to, because we cover Ohio State, but is the national media going to consider those? Particularly if these other 3 leagues play their season, crown a national champion, and it all goes off without a hitch, they're just going to pat the Big Ten and the Pac-12 on the head and say, oh, you're having your nice little winter exhibition season. Too bad you couldn't have played last fall, is kind of how I view it. And I don't know. I think it cuts both ways. It could help prepare people for the fall, but then you could also suffer those wear and tear stress injuries that take you out of winning a championship in the fall too.
And every single one of those guys, Steve, writing about, patting the Big Ten on the head, they will be at the Ohio State-Michigan game. They would be at the Rose Bowl covering it. So I think that also tells you that it is still important. And the lack of, there's no national title is kind of, that's just our thinking of college football in general now, where if teams aren't competing for the national title, then it's who really cares. As to one group who would like to see it, the NFL. They want to see as much film on these guys as possible. Scouts are going to get tired of looking at last year's film. Drafting somebody in May or June of 2021 who hasn't played since 2019, that's not how you get accurate results. And so they'll lay out a plan. They'll be, as we saw Albert Breer, right? They will push the draft back, push the combine back, whatever it takes, I think, to make sure they're not wasting investments, not wasting millions of dollars. All of these programs in the Big Ten and Pac-12 have millions of dollars riding on this. So does every single NFL team, so that they're not drafting the wrong guy. So I think they would want to see as much film as possible, and we could even see some NFL Network airing, football games in the winter as well.
Before I let you guys go, DeAndre, thank you so much for the contribution as always. And I shouldn't do this because some people are going to criticize me for being a homer, but I'm going to take the bait here real quick, and I'm going to address 4-0. Yes, you have every conceivable right to pound your chest for 4-0, But let's understand, this is not the Steelers and the Browns playing twice a year, where over a 8-year span, the same 20 to 40 players are on a 53-man roster. These were 4 isolated teams, different teams playing in 4 isolated years. So this didn't happen like over and over with the same teams playing. That's all I'm going to say. And believe me, if anyone watches me on a regular basis knows that I would be making the same point if this was USC and Stanford. It has nothing to do with Ohio State.
And 2 of those years had injured Buckeye quarterbacks playing. I'm just going to say that.
There you go. It hopefully will catapult into a number of matchups that are meaningful in the future between the 2 schools, because it will be fascinating to see them back on the field. You guys are amazing. I want to say real quick, in addition to BGPO Football Funk, Razmataz, and David Knight, thank you so much for an amazing contribution, and also encouraging others to contribute. Any way you can do it, like, subscribe, follow these guys at their respective sites. Tony Gerdeman, Buckeyes Scoop, Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts on 247 Sports. These guys are amazing and the very best when it comes to Ohio State football coverage. Guys, thanks for hanging out a little bit extra today. Thank you so much for all that you do. We will see everybody next time.
Take care.